Thank you all for joining us. My name is Mike Collins. I'm the Deputy Director of Financial Aid here at Case Western Reserve, and I want to help you better understand your financial aid offer. My goal is by the end of this presentation, you'll just have a better sense of everything that's included in that offer, and that hopefully this whole financial aid process can be just a little bit less scary as far as how you go through just looking at all the terms and the numbers and all the information that's available there. So first and foremost, I just want to say congratulations. So you've been admitted to Case Western Reserve University. That's a really big step. I wish that I could tell you that the hard part is done. There will be some more work that needs to happen. But for now, just really rejoice and congratulate yourselves on making it through to this next step of the journey. Now, everyone should have received their offer of admission. That information would have been sent out to you all electronically. You would have been able to go out into your admission portal and be able to just see that congratulations. And also included on that offer or in that offer of admission would have been any information regarding your merit-based scholarships. All of our general merit-based scholarships are included and would have been sent out with the offer of admission. So that way you can see it just right there in that information. Now, if you apply for financial aid, you'll also see that scholarship listed in the financial aid offer as well. So that way you can just have one place to go to really just comprehensively see all the information that's available. Going back to that financial aid letter, if you haven't looked at the bottom of it, and I know that there are some families who are a little confused by this, at the very bottom, there's going to be something that says the following letters are available for this account, and that's going to list all the different things that you might be able to view. So you'll see the admission decision, and that should be grayed out if you're looking at the admission letter itself, because that's what you're looking at, but you should see a link for the financial aid notification. So there'll be a link there, there'll be a date next to it, and when you click on that, it's going to take you to everything that you need in order to understand what it's going to cost for you to be able to come and stay at Case Western Reserve University. I should also note that the financial information that you see there, it's possible that it can change as information gets updated. So if you are contacting us because there was something that was wrong in your information, for example, or you're going through your FAFSA CSS profile and you've made some corrections, or even if you reach out to us and let us know that there's something else that might be going on, whatever your most recent financial aid information is, it will be listed there and you'll be able to see exactly when it's been updated. When you click on that link and you actually get to the financial aid notification, it will also give you your demographic information. That way you can make sure that you are looking at your information. It'll have your name, it'll have your address. It'll also have your 7-digit ID number. So this number is specific for Case Western Reserve, and this is what we use instead of a social security number to make sure that we can identify you and identify that your information is yours. And when we talk to you or when you're submitting documentation, that things are going where it needs to be. You'll also be able to see the date of whenever your financial aid was most recently updated. So again, if you told us that on the 31st of March, that there was some changes to the number of people in your household, for example, which is also listed on your financial aid offer. You'll see when that information got updated, so you'll know that this is the most recent information that's available. Now, going back to that household, so we wanted to make sure, because there are always questions about just who is included in the household and how many people in that household are also in college. Those are two really big points that can impact your financial aid, even though they're not financial information. And so we put that information front and center to make sure that you understand what we have and what we're basing this aid information off of. And then again, if there are changes, if there is something that's incorrect, make sure that you reach out to us and that you let us know, so that way we can get that information updated and we can get the most recent information sent out to you. The earlier you can do that, the quicker we can get that information out. So that way, when you have to make your decision by May 2nd, you can do that knowing that you have the most recent information available. We also put on the housing type. We want to make sure that you understand that all students, all first-year students are typically required to live on campus. And we assume that students are living on campus as well. So if you are in a situation where you may be commuting or there may be something else going on, again, we just want to make sure that everyone has a clear understanding of what exactly we're basing the financial aid information off of, those points that we know can sometimes be a little mistaken. We always get questions about whether or not there are physical copies of the financial aid offer available. And we know that sometimes you'll need that information for other types of scholarships, or you'll need that information for different types of award banquets or some other types of presentations or organizations. And so at the top on the right-hand corner, you can see there is a link to download the financial aid offer as a PDF. So that way you can take it, you can download it, you can send it out wherever it needs to go. You can print it out and put it up on a refrigerator. Whatever it is you want to do with that physical copy, you're able to go ahead and get that done just by clicking on that link, downloading it, and then doing what you need to do with it. The next section that's listed on the financial aid offer is the cost of attendance. And we do use what we expect the cost to be for this upcoming school year. Now, the cost of attendance also doubles as the legal limit of aid that you can receive, no matter where that aid is from. And it is the starting point of where financial aid gets calculated. It's meant to be an idea of what you will typically need or what you will typically spend throughout the year. And there's different categories. So the first category is called the billable expenses. And we call it that because those are the things that will be listed directly on your bill. You're not going to have a lot of wiggle room. You're not going to have a lot of ability to change what those figures are. The tuition and fees, they are what they are. That's what you are paying in order for you to attend the classes, and that's where the different activity fees are. And also when you think about the things for first-year students, such as orientation or the Discover Days and some of the other resources that are meant to help you better acclimate to your first year, that's where those things come in. Likewise, for housing and meals, you will have some choices in terms of where you stay or maybe even what type of room you stay in. But for a first-year student, it is pretty limited. And so even looking at the differences between them, there really isn't much difference in terms of the actual cost. So what's listed there is where most students will be in terms of a typical double, and also what the costs are for those students. And again, you'll see that information on the bill. It'll really be half and half. So half of it will show up for the fall semester, the other half of it will show up for the spring semester, but all of that information will be there. So that way you can really plan and you can budget. The second section, the additional expenses, those are the things that are not going to be on the bill, but they are things that we typically see or expect students to need throughout the year. So books and supplies. If you're going to college, you need to have books. You need to have some sort of writing utensil. You need to have some sort of paper. There's different things that you'll need in order to get through the school year. And so that $1,200, that's about what we typically see students spending throughout the year. Likewise for personal expenses. Those are things that you are going to probably things that you're going to experience. Thinking about the fact that college is not just in the classroom, that you may have student groups, that you may want to go hang out with your friends and build some camaraderie. Maybe you want to go to the movies. Maybe you want to go to a sporting event. Maybe you just want to go out and get something to eat. Maybe you're treating yourself, you got a really good grade on your latest test, your latest final, and you just want to celebrate a little bit. So we try to put in there, again, what we typically see students spending throughout the year, so that way you can have a better idea of just what you'll need. Most students will not actually have, or you shouldn't see any of those things on the bill. And most students will use things like work study or campus employment or some sort of job to kind of help cover some of those costs. Transportation is the last part of those additional expenses. It is not exactly what you are going to spend on transportation. Rather, it's an allowance based on where you live to kind of help you all to recoup some of the different costs that are involved with traveling to and from campus and getting here, dropping stuff off, and then going back home again. And so in total, you can see what the total costs are for this upcoming school year. And again, that's what we see for the first year. Now, I do want to point out that for the personal expenses in particular, it does include a $66 loan origination fee. So what that is every time you receive any type of a federal loan, a loan from the government takes a piece out of it. So it's almost like a little tax that they take out of it. And for students, it's about 1% what that fee is. And so that fee, if you borrow $100, the government is only going to send 99, and they're going to keep that additional dollar. So by having that fee added into the cost of attendance, it allows us to increase your aid eligibility. So that way you are able to receive a little bit more scholarship, or a little bit more grant, or a little bit more work study, or a little bit more loans. You are able to receive a little bit more aid to help cover what the government is taking. So that way, if you need $100, you'll have the space available for you to be able to receive that full $100. So that was the bill. That was the cost of attendance. That was the things that you are going to be charged and the things that you are going to need. Now, in terms of covering that, that's where this next session comes in. So that's what the grants and scholarships are meant to convey. That's what they're meant to show. And so we do list everything that you're receiving. So if you're receiving some sort of scholarship, if you're receiving some sort of grant, whether it's from the university, whether it is from the federal or state governments, that is where that information is listed. It says a total of gift aid because it's money or funding that you do not have to pay back. So you are receiving this money, it's free and clear, and you can see at the bottom what the costs are going to be after all of that free money has been applied. We do try to be very intentional. And so when you see something that says scholarship, it means that it is a scholarship. It is not going to change. It was based off of the information that you submitted for your application for admission, or any information that you may have submitted for some of those additional scholarships that were released on April the 1st. And so because it says scholarship, you can rest assured that you have that funding for the full 4 years, or sometimes you may hear 8 semesters, making sure that you understand that even if you decide to take a co-op, for example, or some other experience that it requires you to be away for a semester, that you are not going to lose out on that scholarship, that you'll still be able to keep it, even though you may need to be here for an extra semester in order to get the full 8 semesters. Grants, on the other hand, are based entirely off of the information that you would have submitted, thinking about the FAFSA or the CSS profile. Now, for most families, the grant money is going to be about the same year over year. So as long as the FAFSA and the CSS profile, the information that we receive has not changed, then that information should be about the same year over year. So you can, again, rest assured that the amount that you might owe should be about the same year over year as well. However, those things can change. So it's not too late if you haven't submitted information, if you haven't submitted the FAFSA and the CSS profile, it's not too late for you to be able to go ahead and get those documents submitted. So you want to do that as soon as possible. And as things will change year over year, you'll notice that the FAFSA and CSS profile are required each year as well. As a general rule, as resources and things go up, you typically will see the grants go down. And then there's also the reverse of that. As income and resources and things go down, you'll typically see the grants go up. Again, for most families, it tends to stay pretty stable throughout the course of their 4 years. So most families don't have to worry about those changes. But if you are a family where maybe there is some sort of self-employment, or maybe you have children going into or coming out of college, or into or out of the household, if you are having some of those different types of changes, it is possible that there may be some changes to the grant amounts. And so we definitely recommend that you contact the financial aid office if that's something that you're concerned with. That way we can just talk to you a little bit about that process and how that process works. I should also note that Everything is based on you being a full-time student, which for Case Western Reserve is 12 credit hours per semester. And so in order for you to receive these grants and the scholarships, you must be a full-time student. The next section, the student loans and the employment section, is also sometimes referred to as self-help. The reason for that is because you will need to do something in order for you to receive that funding. Take work study, for example. So in order for you to receive the funding from work study, you have to actually work. You have to go get a job. You have to submit your time. You have to have your supervisor approve it. You have to go through and do all of those things. You don't need to pay it back, but you do have to work in order to get it. For Case Western Reserve in particular, we do not expect work study money to be contributed towards the actual billable expenses. So thinking of the tuition and fees and the housing and meals that are at the top of the financial aid offer, we do not expect work study money to be contributed towards those things. As I said before, it's typically the additional expenses. So the books and supplies and the personal expenses where we expect for that funding to go. Loans, on the other hand, you don't need to work for the loans, but you do need to pay the loans back. And so that's where that self portion comes in, because while you're receiving this money up front, you do need to make payments on it later on. There's two different types of federal loans. One is called the subsidized loan, and the other one is called the unsubsidized loan. Now, the only difference between the two is that for the subsidized loan, the government is going to cover the interest while you're in school. That happens while you are in undergraduate school, but also if you decide to go on to graduate school or a professional program, doctor, lawyer, dentist, whatever it might be, while you are enrolled in school and while you are at least a half-time student, the government will continue to cover those subsidized loans. $3,500 is the maximum that a student can receive for the first year. The unsubsidized loans, the government will not cover the interest on those. Now, you're not required to make payments on any loans until 6 months after you're no longer in school. So thinking about graduation, if you graduate in May, which is the 5th month, you won't be required to start making payments until November. So you'll have 6 months for that to happen. But for the unsubsidized loan, that interest will be accruing each month. The government does handle interest a little bit differently than most typical other places. And what I mean by that is they don't capitalize the interest. They don't charge you interest on the interest. So if you borrow $2,000, when they're calculating the interest each month, it will be based off of that same $2,000. So if it ends up being 20 cents a month in interest, for example, it will be 20 cents a month until you start paying the loan back. It won't be 20 cents the first month and then 20 cents, 21 cents the second and 22 cents the third, because again, they're not charging that interest on the interest. And so at the bottom of that section, you'll see, okay, the first part showed what the estimated responsibility was going to be after all of the gift aid. And so then taking out all of the self-help, it gives you an idea of what you'll need and what to cover after everything else has gone through. Student employment, the amount that we show is meant to be used over the course of the full year. And we know that students are not going to be able to use it right away because you haven't had time to work by the time you come to campus. Now, when you do come to campus, you do want to make sure you're bringing some original documentation with you. You'll receive some emails from our student employment office over the course of the summer, giving you a listing of what types of documentation that they'll need. But typically the government does require that we see the original proof of your identity. So whether that is a driver's license or a social security card or your passport, whatever it might be, we'll make a copy of it here in the office. And so we typically recommend that you bring it during the Discover Week, during that orientation time period. That way we can do what we need to do. We can go ahead and make the copies. You can get all the paperwork submitted, and then your parents can take it back home with them. So that way you don't have to worry about trying to keep track of those things throughout the year as you're getting moved in and getting everything else done. Typically, students will earn about, or the minimum wage on campus currently is $9.20 an hour. There are quite a few jobs that pay more than that, but there are none that pay less than that. And so depending upon how much you're being paid and how much you're working, that will determine how quickly you use up those work study funds. Now, again, because it's not something that is being or that is expected to be used towards the bills, if you were to decide not to work for that first semester, for example, or maybe you decided not to work over the course of the full year because you just really wanted to get a handle on things before you dipped your foot into the working pool, you don't have to worry about the bills going up because you're not working. You do, however, need to worry about some of those, again, the books and supplies and our personal expenses. So if parents, if you all are covering the bills and that's what you're budgeting and that's what you're expecting, there may be a little bit of gap in covering some of those other expenses if the student isn't working. You're paid twice a month, the 15th and the last business day of the month. And for those of you who have work study in particular, it is worthwhile to use the work study, even if you may have some other job lined up. You pay taxes on it just like a normal job. You have to include it in your taxes just like a normal job. But for work study in particular, when you fill out the FAFSA, the FAFSA will allow you to indicate how much of your earnings over the course of the year was for work study, and it will take that out of the calculations. So if you earn a total of $10,000 over the course of the year, maybe you had some money from summer that you earned, and you just had whatever you earned during the school year. And let's say that of that 10,000, 2,500 of it was from work study. When you're completing the FAFSA and filling out the information, you'll tell it that you earned $10,000, but when it does the calculation, it will do it off of 2,500. Most students are only working about 8 to 10 hours at the max. So we typically don't see students earning or really going over the work study that they're receiving. And that's sort of where the figures come in, just what we typically see first year students or second or third year students earning. But if it does come to a point where you are reaching the limit of your work study, it is possible that for you to either contact financial aid to see if more might be available, or also to reach out to your employer, let them know that you're using the rest of your work study and see if they might be able to convert you from a work study student into a non-work study student. I should also mention that fully 2/3 of our students who work on campus do not actually have work study. So it shouldn't be all that difficult for most positions for you to transfer from one to the other if you happen to use up your work study throughout the year. Now, so that's all of the aid information. In terms of understanding what that means for you in particular. So again, I mentioned before, the billable expenses is what you're going to see on your bill. So if you take the tuition and fees and you take the housing and meal plans, you'll have the figure of what you are going to need to pay over the course of the full year. When you subtract your grants or scholarships, that's going to show you, okay, this is what you'll need to pay without loans. And so you can take it and you can put those numbers into a calculator and be able to see exactly what those figures will be. And then again, taking the loans. So I mentioned before that the government charges a fee for all student loans. And so that fee for right now, it is 1.05%. And it is something that's taken off of the top of the loan. So if you have the full amount of the subsidized and unsubsidized loans, you can go ahead and you can use that figure that's listed there, the 5,000, actually 442, because the government does round up in terms of the amount that they're providing for you. So if there are cents, they do round up to the next dollar. And so that will give you a better idea of what the amount that you'll need to pay out of pocket on the bill would be. And you can see, okay, this is what the amount is for the full year. Half of that should be due for the fall semester, and bills are due by the end of the second week of classes. So that'll be around the first week of September for this year. And then the second half would be due at the end of the second week of classes for the spring semester, which is typically around the end of January. I should mention that we are telling you what you are eligible to receive. So when it comes to work study or when it comes to loans, typically we're telling you what you are able to receive. The loans, the government makes the limits for the loans, so it cannot exceed that figure, but you are not required to borrow that full amount. Over the summer, you'll get more information and you will officially be able to accept or decline the different amounts of the loans and the different parts of the aid. And when you do that, you're telling us exactly how much you want to be able to receive. For work study, because there isn't quite that same cap for the work study, you are able to sometimes increase that number. Again, just depending upon the other types of aid you have, the other amounts of aid that you have as well. And honestly, it also just depends upon the funding that we have available. The government does give us a set pool of funding for work study. And so once that pool is used up, there are no more funds available. So we do try to distribute it mostly for undergrad students. There are a couple of graduate programs, not many, who may be able to receive it on demand, but typically the work study money, what you're typically being given is typically about the maximum that students are able to receive. Now, so you have that figure, and you see, okay, this is the full amount that's going to be due for the year. If you are able to cover that amount, splitting it in half fall and spring, that's perfectly fine. You can go ahead and do that. If you have other outside resources that might be able to help you, if you have friends or family or something else, savings that might be available, that's great as well. But for those families who may not be able to cover that full amount, there is additional options available. So even though the government caps what a student is able to borrow, there is what's called the parent loan for undergraduate students, or it's called PLUS for short, that you can use as a parent to finance or to borrow the remaining amount of what you might need in order to cover the cost. Now, the maximum amount that you can borrow for this PLUS will always be the difference between whatever the costs are and the aid that you're receiving. So thinking about all of the scholarships and grants and loans and work study and everything together. So if you take those things together and you subtract them all, that difference is going to be the amount that you'll be able to receive. Now you might see here, so I took the amounts for the student that I've been working with throughout the presentation here and looking with those figures. What I did was I took the amounts for the PLUS loan and I subtracted the fee for that, which it is a bit higher. The government charges a 4% fee per parent, so it is higher, although it works on the same principle. And you'll see that the amount that's listed there, the $28.97, is higher than the $24.17 that the bill was going to be due. And the reason for that is because you're able to borrow the PLUS and you're able to increase the PLUS amount to help to cover some of those additional expenses. And so anytime you're receiving more money than whatever the charges are, that extra money would get sent to you as a refund. So if it's coming from the PLUS loan, it would be sent to the parent since it is technically their funding. If it was coming from the student loans or if it was coming from an outside scholarship, it's something that would get sent to the student. And so that's typically how students who are receiving the full amount or parents who are taking out this additional PLUS, that's typically how they receive those extra funds to help cover the books and supplies, for example, if that's something that you wanted to do. And so the amounts that you'll see, it is going to differ a little bit, student by student, just based on the types of aid and the amounts of aid that they're receiving. But parents will always have that option. It is credit-based, and so the government is typically performing a credit check. Everything's going to go through them, and they are really looking at whether or not you have paid your bills in the past. They're not looking at credit score. They're not looking at debt to income ratio. They're not even considering whether or not you're working. So that's not what they're focused on. They're focused on your bills, and they're focused on your payments of those bills and whether or not those payments have been on time. They will give you the option to either start making payments on this plus loan immediately, or you will have the option to push those payments back until after the student has graduated as well. And again, just like with the student loans, you're not obligated to take out that full amount. We are just telling you the maximum amount that you're eligible for. So that way you have a full idea of what exactly you'll be able to receive and sort of where those funds are going to be coming from. Now, so that takes us through the portion of the financial aid offer. But I also want to make sure that you understand that, as I said before, you have to renew your aid each year. You had until 2 weeks after the admission deadline typically to have that information first submitted. Although, as I said before, if you still need to submit the FAFSA, or if you need to submit changes, you still have time to do that. And so I would say to go ahead and do that as soon as possible, so that way we can get your information updated and sent out to you. But as a returning student, as a student who's already here, you'll actually have until March 1st to submit your financial aid forms. And again, as I said before, for most families, the aid that they're receiving this first year tends to be pretty similar to what they're receiving in other years as well, because their information, their jobs, their household size, typically the number of students in college, those things all tend to be pretty stable and not changing. So if your information is not changing, I would say to just go ahead and get it done, so that way you can get it over with. And then there's one less thing for you to worry about. If your information is changing, that's even more of a reason for you to get it done. So that way we can have that information. And while we may not necessarily be able to give you exactly what your aid is going to be up front, we can give you an idea of how those changes may happen, or what those changes might do to your financial aid for the future. Now, speaking of that aid, it pays out typically at the start of classes. Although for this first year, for this first semester, we do pay out the money. The money does get released a couple weeks earlier. We try to release it that weekend before Discover Days. So that way, when you all are all here together and you're getting moved in, and parents are here and students are here, and you all are able to take care of all the different documents and paperwork and everything else, that you can get this done as well. So that way, by the time you arrive here on campus, the money would have already paid out, and you'll know exactly whether or not everything is went according to plan, or if something didn't happen the way it was supposed to, and you need to come into the financial aid office to figure out what's going on. It's important to note that the bills are going to first be sent out in July. So around the middle of July is when that first bill is going to come out for the fall semester, and is only going to be sent to the student's Case Western Reserve email address. Once students start at Case Western Reserve, the privacy laws change. It does not matter how old the student is. Students have to give permission in order for parents or anyone else to be able to receive any type of billing or payment information, or even to have access to the financial aid information. Now, there is a special process. It's called an authorized user, and you'll be getting information for that authorized user process over the summer, and it will be included on the bill. But those things will be, that's the way that parents are able to get their own ID and password, be able to receive their own copy of the bill, and to be able to go out and take a look at that information on their own, separate from the student. So I say this to everyone, even if you want to, parents that is, even if you want to give your children their independence, you trust them, you know that they're going to do what they need to do, I still recommend that you have them sign you up for that authorized user, because you, at the end of the day, you're going to be the one that they're going to come to because something hasn't worked out right. And you'll need to be able to have access to that information in order to try to figure out what that is, in order to talk to us, and in order to figure out how to get everything corrected. And so without that permission, without being listed as an authorized user for the billing system or that separate process you all will get over the summer for the financial aid system, without that information in place, you're not going to be able to talk about or see any of that information. And that's just going to make things a lot more difficult in trying to get them done. Now, So we do have some time here for me to answer some general questions for you all, but I do want to take a minute just to make sure that you understand that here in financial aid, we want to help you all, but we need to know that you need that help. And so if you have questions, if you have concerns, if there's something that you're not sure about, even if it's just a little bit of anxiety and you're anxious and you just want someone to reassure you that what you're seeing is correct, reach out and let us know. You can go ahead and call us. You can email us. We are open 8:30 to 5. So there's no appointment that's needed in order for you to walk in. But if you happen to not be around campus, or if you happen to be just not available, you can set up some video meetings as well. So right there on the main financial aid website, there is a sidebar on the right-hand side where you're able to schedule appointments. Appointments for the month of April are a little bit more limited as we are involved in the different programs that are happening on campus, but we typically do have open office hours. So while you can come into the office and see us, you can also go to the room that we have available in the university center during the presentation days as well, and come in and stop off and talk to someone also. So if that's going to be the only time that you're on campus, then you can go ahead and get that done without having to go all the way across campus or leaving any of the admission program sites in order to get that information done. Now, let's see, what sort of questions do we have here? So I have one question. So if I reach my work study limit, does that mean that I have to quit my job? And that's not the case at all. Generally, students who reach their limit for work study, again, you have two options. You can, one, see if it's even possible to have the work study increased. That's not always possible, but in some cases it may be. But also you can reach out to your department and find out if they're able to convert you over from a work study student to a non-work study student. For you as a student, it really doesn't change. So you may need to submit some different paperwork, but you are still going to be paid the same. You're still going to have the same responsibilities. The difference is more so for the department. Students who have work study, the government is actually paying anywhere from 2/3 to 3/4 of the salary. So it's a way sometimes for departments to get 3 or 4 students for the price of one. Again, everything else is the same for the student, is more so on the back end. Some of those really smaller departments, or those departments who may have a little bit of a tighter budget, those are the ones that may be a little harder in order for them to change you over from work study to non-work study. But definitely go ahead and talk to your supervisor to find out if that's something that they're able to do, because for most jobs, for many jobs, it definitely is. Now, there's a couple of questions about unsubsidized loans and how to get the unsubsidized loans, and also about the PLUS loans. So the information on these loans in terms of what they are and how they work will be available on the government's website, studentaid.gov. We are going to send you out some step-by-step instructions, typically around the middle to end of May, just telling you exactly where to go and what to do for those loans. We wait that long because that's when the government releases what the interest rates will be for the next year. So that way we can make sure that we're giving you that information all at once. But when you go through and you see that information, you will see, you'll find out that you have to go through what's called interest counseling. That counseling is going to tell you all about what those loans are, what to expect for those loans, what the different terms means, and it is something that's required. So that way you know upfront what you're getting yourselves into. There's no same counseling for the PLUS loan. The government doesn't go that extra step for parents, but for parents, they are required to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident in order for them to receive the PLUS. So if your parent is not a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, the government may allow us to treat you for loan purposes only as an independent student. What that means is we can actually increase your unsubsidized loans. And the same thing happens if a parent is denied for the PLUS as well. So we do know that not every parent has what the government is looking for. And so for those families who are denied for the parent loan, the government will also allow us to consider them to be for loan purposes only as an independent student and provide them with that additional $4,000. It will be $4,000 of the unsubsidized loan. So it will still be the same type of loan, the same requirements, the same information that's available, interest rates and fees and all of those things. But again, it would be additional for you as a student instead of the parent. So we have another question about how outside scholarships are applied. So for Case Western Reserve, we are a school that meets financial need. What that means is we take the difference between whatever the cost of attendance is and the information we get from the FAFSA profile, and that difference, that's the need, that's what your aid eligibility is. Now, when students receive outside scholarships, those outside scholarships are first applied towards any of the self-help. So any of the scholarships, any of the loans, any of the work study, whether it's subsidized or unsubsidized loan, whether it's federal work study or campus employment, is applied to those things first. Now, once those things have all been replaced, students do have the option, if it's needed, to let us know that they do want the loans. Maybe you do need the loans. Maybe you're counting on the outside scholarship to help cover $5,000 of your parent contribution, or $5,000 that's left over after all of the self-help and the gift aid has been applied already. Well, if you need that and you need to have the loans added back on, go ahead and let us know, and we can go ahead and get that added. Now, if after all of the self-help has been taken away, you still have some additional loans. Maybe you have $10,000 of loans, for example, or I'm sorry, $10,000 of outside scholarship. Well, if you look, so the maximum that a first-year student can receive in self-help is typically $8,000, which means that there's about $2,000 that's left over. Because we are a school that meets need, and because of how the aid is processed, we would be required at that point for this first year to reduce any type of grant that you might have by $2,000 to make sure that everything is still meeting that need. Now, that's specific for grant. If you don't have any grant, or maybe you have enough outside scholarships that all of your grants have already been covered, as well as the self-help, outside scholarships will not reduce any type of university scholarship unless what you're receiving is taking you over that cost of attendance. So that's the only case where you might see an outside scholarship replace any type of university scholarship, but we always make sure that is going towards that self-help, the loans and the work study first. So there's a couple of questions about work study and just how that helps to lower the estimated responsibility, or how it helps to lower what might be owed to the university. So to make sure that it's clear, work study for Case Western Reserve is not meant to lower the bill. So you cannot be paid until you've worked, and knowing that bills are due the end of the second week of classes, a student will not have earned enough, at least for the first semester, to really make any significant contribution towards the bill for the fall semester. And so we expect that any money that a student is earning through work study or campus employment is going to go towards the books and supplies or the personal expenses. So if you need to get additional books, or maybe you have additional lab fees or lab equipment that might be needed during the semester, that's where we expect the work study money to come in. If you wanted to go out to get something to eat, if you wanted to, at a fancy restaurant, that is, or if you wanted to go out to the movies or go see a sporting event or something of that nature, that's where we expect the work study money to come in. Now, if you are working and you're saving that money, and maybe you're working quite a bit during the course of the fall semester, and you haven't really had any extra books and supply expenses, or you haven't really gone out and spent a whole bunch in terms of personal expenses, so you do have quite a bit saved up for the spring semester, that is a case where you can take that work study money, that you would have saved, and you can have it applied to the bill at that point. Again, we're not expecting it to be applied towards the bill. So that is how you can use that money to help whatever the remaining payments are on the bill or for the billable expenses in order to cover the cost there. If you were to also to decide to take that work study money and maybe your parents are able to cover whatever the leftover amount is, if you are able to, if that's the case, you can take that work study money, have it applied to your account later on, and let the financial aid office know that you want to instead reduce your loans. Maybe you do earn a full $2,000 in work study over the course of the year, which is the same amount as the unsubsidized loan. We can have the unsubsidized loan removed even after it's already paid. And typically, as long as it's done before the semester has ended, we can request that the government cancels out any of the fees and interest as well. So that's something that can be done with those work study funds also. So as far as the cost of attendance and as far as receiving a bill, like I said before, the bills are due by the end of the second week of classes typically. I don't have the exact date, but I know that classes begin on August the 29th. So the second Friday after August the 29th is when bills will be due. Late fees are typically added about a week and a half to 2 weeks after that point. So there is a little bit of a grace period from when bills are due to when any type of late fee might be added on. I will note that for Case Western Reserve, we do not kick students out of classes. If their bills have not been paid, they are still able to access all of the housing and all of the meal plans as well. Students just are not able to register for the next semester until the bill has been paid. And that typically happens in November. So if you think it's going to come to that, reach out to the financial aid office, maybe reach out to the billing department. So that way we can work with you to make sure that everything is being covered. Now, I did not mention when I was doing the presentation about the health plan. So students are required to have health insurance at Case Western Reserve. Or students are required to have health insurance when they're in school, period. So that is a requirement. Most students will have their health insurance waived because they have insurance someplace else. So as long as the insurance is something that is valid here at the university, as long as it's something that will cover you here in Northeast Ohio, and it's comparable to what the university offers, there will be a process over the summer for you to share that information, to share that proof with us. So that way we can go through and we can have your medical plan waived. For those students who are not able to waive the medical plan, there will be some additional loan options available. So the university does have some university-specific loan funding that's set aside specifically to help with those students who may need help covering the medical plan. That's something that, again, if you are in that situation, I recommend that you reach out to financial aid and that you let us know. So that way we can go ahead and we can get that information taken care of. Again, depending upon what type of aid you're receiving and how much that aid is, you may not need that additional loan. You may be able to have it covered just with part of your other aid, or maybe taking out the parent loan, the plus, if that's something that you want to do. So there are those different types of options that will be available. And again, here in the financial aid office, we're definitely willing, we're definitely able and wanting to kind of help you all with that process if that's something that you might need. There are a couple of questions just about appealing for financial aid or taking into account the information that's received that is received in cases where it may not necessarily match up, or in cases where the information we receive just isn't quite feasible for what you may have budgeted. So that's where appealing or sending information for a reevaluation will come in. Going to the main financial aid website, just case.edu/financial aid, there's a tab at the top that says for undergraduate students. And if you click on that tab, you'll see a link for how you can go through and you can appeal or you can submit information for your financial aid. Now, when we say appeal, or when we talk about taking those additional special circumstances into consideration, what we're talking about is there's something that's happened to your household. And so the information that we have, which is based on 2020 tax year information, is no longer relevant. Whether that is a death in the family, for example, or whether that is a loss of job. I know that especially during this time of COVID, that there's been a lot of changes over the past couple of years. And so we want to make sure that there is something that is in place. The government requires that you use 2020 tax year information, but this reevaluation process will allow you to give us what we need in order to see if it's possible for us to make considerations and use more recent information. Typically, we will need and we will have to receive a copy of your 2021 taxes. So if you have not done that yet, I recommend that you do that as soon as possible if you want to try to get this process done before May 2nd. For those of you who may commit to the university, you may say, okay, you know, I think that we're close and I think that we can make this work. Yes, we've had these things going on, but I think that we can still handle it. Just because you have submitted your enrollment information, you confirmed your enrollment, that does not mean that we will no longer review or look at that reevaluation information. So if it does take you a little longer, then you can go ahead and get that done. We cannot, however, delay you accepting or confirming your enrollment because you're going through this reevaluation process. So that's not something that we're able to do. So in those cases, we typically tell families that you have to make the decision based on the information you have, and then anything that may come out of the reevaluation process, that will just kind of be icing on the top. And we are looking not just at what the university has available, but we are also looking at whatever might be available through the government, whether it is federal or state as well. That process is completely separate from the merit appeals. So we're only able to work with the need-based aid, so the grants and the loans and the work study. If there are appeals based on, if you are trying to submit an appeal based on a merit scholarship, realistically, that is a little difficult to do, because I know that the university, we do go out with our best offer using all of the information that was available on the office or on the application for admission. And so unless there's something that was really substantial that may have been missed on the application, it's not likely that you'll see a ton of changes in the merit scholarship. However, admission does have a separate link that is set up, so you can reach out to them to receive that information if you feel that there is something that may have been missed, for them to go through and for them to take another look at your merit-based scholarship. I mentioned before, and I have a couple questions just about the housing. So when we're calculating the cost of attendance, we're required to use like information for like students. On campus first year students, they're typically staying in the same place. We have to have one figure for on campus first year students. Students who are off campus, that off campus costs are typically a little bit less than what you're paying on campus. So we do have to have a set figure for that allowance for students who are off campus. However, for first and second year students, you're required to be on campus. So the only way for you to be off campus is if you're commuting. Typically, a commuter needs to live, so their permanent address, their family's address, needs to be within 40 miles of the university. And that's something that you'll need to have confirmed with housing in order for that process to move forward. Students who are commuting, it's expected that your parents are already paying for rent and utilities. Your parents are already paying for food and things of that nature, and that they will continue to support you in that manner. So while you may have seen that $17,000 figure for housing and meals for a on-campus student, that figure drops substantially, not quite down to zero, because we do realize that there are some additional costs in terms of getting to and from campus, for example, or maybe having another person staying at home. There might be a little bit more of a cost for utilities, water and food maybe costs a little bit more for a family of 3 than it does for a family of 2, or family of 4 than it is for a family of 3. So I won't say that that number drops down to 0, but it does drop down substantially. You're not being charged that figure. So in that case, it is considered more of an allowance to, again, help you to receive a little bit more aid to kind of help with the cost of covering the cost of you commuting. There are a couple of questions about summer. So as a first-year student, you're typically not allowed to take classes over the summer. You've done 12 years of school, you've done all these impressive things, and we want you to at least take one summer to kind of decompress and enjoy yourself before you go ahead and get started. But moving forward, there is aid available for the summer, but it's only federal funding. So tuition is already half price for students who are taking classes over the summer. And so there's not any type of scholarships or grants that's available from the university. However, there may be some additional federal grants as well as federal loans that might be available. And so if that's something that you're interested in, again, reach out to us. I would probably say reach out to us around the spring semester, the start or middle of the spring semester. Let us know that you're planning on taking summer classes, and we can talk to you about how that process works, what the requirements are in terms of enrollment. But as an incoming first-year student, that really isn't something that you'll be able to do. So at least for this summer, go out, enjoy yourself, and live it up a little. Let's see. So there's also a couple of questions just about when to start applying for loans, whether that is the parent loan or whether it's the student loans. Because the documentation for the loans is school specific, so the counseling that I mentioned, you'll need to submit promissory notes, basically you agreeing to not only take out the loan, but also that you're going to pay the loan back. Because they are school specific, we ask that you don't submit anything until the summertime. So over the summer is when you'll want to start submitting your documentation, when you'll want to start applying for the PLUS loan. If you needed a specific date, we typically say to try to have everything done by the end of July. It typically takes about 2 weeks for processing for federal loans. And if you can have it done by the end of July, one, you'll have the bill already. So that way you can see officially what those figures are that you'll need, even though you may have done the numbers. I know for some families it's helpful just to see the actual information, but also it gives you the ability to go through and have enough time to get everything researched and figure out exactly what you want to do. And we'll still have enough time to have it processed before the money starts to pay out, again, that Friday before students move in. So I think I have time for just one more question. I want to be conscious of your time here. And so it looks like there's still some questions just about work study. So over the summer, our Student Employment Office, they compile all the different jobs. They compile what the different pays are going to be. They compile how many students the different departments are going to need. They'll send you some emails over the summer that's going to give you details about what you should expect to receive and what you should expect to bring with you. During the Discover Days is when students have the time, or that's when students are first introduced to what jobs are available. And you as first-year students will get the first shot. You will be the first ones to know what jobs are available and how to go about that process. And so as you get those emails over the summer, I would just say pay attention to them. You may get a couple of them, one here, one there. You may also get them all in a row. There will also be a newsletter that's sent out both to students and parents over the summer. So we are going to reach out to you all continually to make sure that you are receiving the information you need, that you have the timelines in place, so that way you can go ahead and get everything done. But again, as far as work study goes, you all will be the first ones able to actually know what jobs are available and to be able to apply for the jobs. So that's all the time that we have for right now. But again, If you have additional questions, if there's things that I have not touched on, or you may be a little bit more confused, reach out to us. Phone, email, video meeting, whatever, in person, whatever it might be. We're here to help, and we want to help. Just let us know that you need it, and we can go ahead and we can move on. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you all have a nice evening.